BFB's Post Split took the world by storm, and not in a good way. Fans were clearly upset, often confused with the overall idea of a split, and why it had happened in the first place. However, me and many other hard-time BFDI fans stayed optimistic, and took this idea of a split lightly, hoping good things would come out of it in the end. Only for half of the contestants to get derailed, and to have Flower win because of writer's bias.
We just lost over half our contestants Is the show gonna be okay?
Nope.
Post Split had lots and lots of issues, with many complaints forming left and right. Many fans had even used Post Split as an excuse to leave the BFDI community entirely, due to how bad the second half of the season had been. But today, I want to take a stance on this mood swing of a season, and explain what could have been done differently to better improve the season entirely. And to me, it all comes down to two factors: the cast, and the writing style. I'll break this video into two sections talking about these 2 points and how they could be fixed to create an even better season of BFB's Post Split. Also, it's important to note that all these changes being made are based upon my own personal opinion, and it is likely that there are some things that you may not agree with. It's still important to stay respectful of my beliefs and opinions. But without further ado, let's get into it. Let's travel back to March 25, 2020, the day the split happened. Now let's look at the cast. 14 contestants, which isn't a bad thing per se. In fact, most of these characters were pretty popular and were exciting to see here. For example, it was discovered that both Ruby and Gelatin would both remain in BFB, which could bring back a lot of humor on fans.
Alright, Pop.
Don't call me that.
The radio's broken, so I just thought I'd sing for you. La la la, driving with my friend, this is so much fun!
Enough of that.
Furthermore, we also find out that newbie characters such as Taco and Lollipop are getting their chance to shine this season. And with such a small cast in this era, it looked like everyone would get a potential to have a cool arc or storyline. However, when we actually look at the rest of the cast and how they were used throughout the season, we can find a lot of mediocre, or even filler-type picks. The most notable of these cases comes when we look at the two rejoiners, Loser and Spongy. Now, at the time, having Loser back was amazing. Remember, we are not in 2023 right now, we are thinking about these characters as if they were back in 2020, and at the time, Loser was an extremely popular character for them, being wise and almost like an old sensei. But now, when we move to 2023, we can see that his character completely changes throughout the Post Split, turning from a sweet comforting character to an egocentric clout chaser.
Oh my Gordita!
I'm gonna take this back!
But things get even worse when we turn to Spongy, as back in 2020, he was in a terrible position for himself. In BFB 16, he had already received a total of 22,846 votes as a result of his actions in the previous 2 episodes, which is safe to say that nearly everyone had hated him at the time. And seeing him completely avoid his elimination, and do next to nothing in the time he does have to redeem himself in Post Split, further infuriated everyone. But now I think it's time we talk about another group of characters in Post Split that essentially served as filler. The trio, Fiery, Leafy, and Bubble. Now, as much as I love Fiery, even I cannot lie, these characters had no purpose in the season besides finishing up their arcs that had been long going since the original season of BFDI. Especially with Fiery and Leafy, besides what happened in BFB 22, the three did little to nothing the rest of the season, and completely robbed other characters of making it farther in the end. Especially Leafy. So that makes 5 filler characters that had no purpose competing in this season at all. But we aren't even close to done, as I also think that Balloony and Teardrop had little time to shine this season. Balloony literally was the first character eliminated from his team and had no chance at all to rejoin, which is unfortunate when you can clearly see the writers trying to set up some sort of a plot arc with Lollipop early on in BFB 17.
Did you guys just high five?
Anyways, on to Teardrop. Despite placing 3rd place this season, she really only survived through viewer voting and didn't do much during the season. The only arguably interesting thing she had done this season was betray Flower in BFB 27 and join the Newbie Alliance, and even then, she was only added because of Gelatin. As much as she's loved, I cannot lie, they had no purpose at all in Post Split, and did not deserve Final 3 among the 14 contestants. So realistically, that leaves us with 7 characters that had actually done stuff throughout post-split. How sad. Only half of the characters in the season actually matter, which says a lot about how bad this season had been handled. With this in mind, it's clear that a change in cast would greatly benefit this season, where we swap out many of the filler characters, and replace them with better ones that would make the show interesting. And I have a few ideas in mind. First off, keep Loser and Spongy in the exit and replace them with 2 other characters. These 2 were essentially doomed from the start, and if they never escaped from the exit unfairly, or were derailed, they may be better liked by fans. As for the characters I think they could be replaced by, this may be controversial, but in taking Loser and Spongy's place, I would bring in Tree from TPOT onto BFB, and let Lie escape the exit to join BFB as well. Prior to BFB 16, these 2 had already been loved characters enough, especially Lie, with her probably having the greatest chance of escaping the exit in TPOT if they were ever voted to return. Plus, if Tree were to also participate in this season of BFB, they could better finish off their arc created in pre-split, and both of them could gain a lot of development, but I'll talk more about that in the second section of the video. My next solution would be to replace Teardrop and send her off to TPOT. We've already seen in the past Teardrop excelling and creating an amazing fan base in TPOT, much better than she's ever had in BFB. This leaves room for another character to replace Teardrop, who in my opinion should be Cloudy.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Okay, I know what people are thinking. Cloudy? He stands no chance in BFB, especially when paired with the competition. Why Cloudy? Why not send Balloony and Cloudy to TPOT? This brings me to my next solution. Let's take a step back for a second. When we look at the original cast for TPOT, we can see that the cast contains a mixture of developed characters, joke characters, and other small yet memorable ones. But with the original intent of BFB, the show's creators had wanted only developed characters to appear in the cast. And we all know how that went. So my take for this alternate reality is to not have a cast of only 14 quote-unquote well-developed contestants, rather I think BFB should have a similar idea for its cast as TPOT. A cast with developed, joke, and other memorable characters. Hence why Cloudy is here. Now, I know people will still argue that Cloudy would most likely be the first contestant out from his team, which I most definitely can agree to, but this brings me to my final addition and idea I would make to the cast of Post Split. Adding more characters. Now this is probably going to be the part with the most controversy. But I think that instead of limiting this season to having only 14 contestants, what if we had more? About 21 characters would do better than 14 in my opinion. Hear me out, the original intent of BFB was to be a mixture of the original season of BFDI with also having serious and well-developed characters. This intent wouldn't work with such a small cast, and in general, wouldn't work at all since they are clashing both a serious tone, for a series with a comical tone. But when looking at TPOT, since it had been made to be entirely serious, we could shift BFB back to being primarily comical and silly like BFDI, to create an actual balance between the 2 seasons of being serious and funny. Especially with how derailed many of the characters had gotten in the original version of BFB, adding more characters would most likely take away from the idea of several characters being derailed. Hence why I wanted it Cloudy here, especially with the potential friendship him and Balloony could hold when they are together. Furthermore, a larger cast in BFB could also mean a smaller cast in TPOT, which I am not saying TPOT shouldn't have a large cast, but it shouldn't have started off with a cast of 42, technically 43 with Teardrop's inclusion. With the addition of many characters being taken from TPOT to BFB increasing the cast of BFB from 14 to 21, TPOT's overall cast size would be lowered to around 34 or 35 characters. Which isn't bad, and doesn't take away from how TPOT is handled. Also, as a side note, despite what I had said earlier, the finalists essentially wouldn't be benefited if they were switched over to TPOT, and so for the sake of the cast and finishing up their arcs, the trio would remain in BFB. Now, we currently have a cast of 14 characters and need to bring 7 more TPOT contestants to BFB. I won't go into heavy detail as to which characters should be added, but explanations will be provided. The first character I would like to transfer over to BFB would be Fanny, as they could carry over amazing dynamics or arcs with some of the characters in the cast, especially with Lollipop or Flower. Sure, In Teapot you could argue he has done the same, but that was once Lightning had told and encouraged Fanny to do so. In BFB there are many arcs that could occur here naturally, as there wouldn't really be much that would change in Teapot once Fanny leaves. The second character I would transfer to BFB is Remote. Remote is already an well-established and amazingly developed character, who was quickly robbed in Teapot because of her screen time. But because of the potential arc that could form between Remote, Tree and Lie in this universe, it feels that they have a much stronger chance of lasting longer than some of the original characters in Post Split. Hence why she is placed here. Ice Cube would also be another character I would pull along to BFB, and this one is much more explanatory. Ice Cube is already on good terms with the remaining Alliance members in BFB, and her inclusion could strengthen those two's relevance in the series. It could also bring upon a good amount of world building with the characters as well. Next, I would also bring in Lightning to BFB. Not much to add here, they would just bring in a lot of character to Post Split, especially with how well they performed in TPOT. I would also bring along Book as the fifth character to swap over to BFB because let's be real. In TPOT, he serves little to no purpose other than to be Pillow's guardian. Especially with how little friends Book has left, he would do miles better than he already is in BFB, especially since his original Alliance members would be there and Ice Cube could serve as another arc point with them. The last two characters I would tag along to BFB would be Bommy and Barf Bag. The main reason I would pick these two would be because they mostly have not done much in TPOT, especially Barf Bag. And with Lollipop competing in BFB, a lot of plot lines or potential arcs would occur between these two and their rivalship. So now this would be how the cast appears. 21 contestants in BFB, and around 35 characters in TPOT. And personally, this already looks like a way better cast than Post Split ever had been. With many characters here holding potential storylines with one another, there is a lot of room for great drama or action to occur here, even if they remained with the original intent of having the show be a mix of being serious and being laid back. But, we would need to make sure the creators do that properly. We already have a great cast at hand, so the writing just has to make sure not completely ruin the characters, and the show entirely. Which brings us to our next section. Besides the cast, the writing is probably one of the worst parts ever about Post Split. Heck, BFB 25 is agreed upon by many members of the community to be the worst episode of BFDI ever, but because an already perfect cast had been set up for this alternate Post Split, all they need to do is make sure that things happen that make sense for the characters in the show. And with this cast, there are a lot of ideas at hand. Here are just a few ideas I have. First off, because Balloony is now actually able to last longer with more characters in the cast, maybe he could join the newbie alliance alongside Gelatin and Lollipop, and could maybe even include Cloudy in that group as well. Another idea, because Tree and Remote would be coming together out of pre-split alone, maybe they would want to find a new group for a Death Pact again, which could force new crazy team dynamics. Maybe Book would turn to Taco in terms of trying to gain back Ice Cube's friendship, which could create a small little arc. Or even better, Taco and Barf Bag would get to interact together more and we could get to see more of their past friendship. The list just goes on and on. The writers just need to make sure the episodes and the writing style stay consistent. The first episode, BFB 17, was amazing and gave hope to many fans that the split could actually be successful. BFB 18 followed in a similar direction with the hints of a connection occurring between Fiery and Leafy as well as many other characters. But once we reach episodes like BFB 19 and 20, the show really starts to become hit or miss. Sometimes, the season remains high quality and extremely well written when other times everything just feels completely dumb, and none of it makes sense. The show needs to remain logical and consistent, having arcs and plot holes that mean something because at this point, it feels almost like the show doesn't know what it wants to be.
Here is my totem. For it took me forever to find it. Flower, please. This is a rock.
Another small thing that should be talked about in the writing is how the Exiters are handled. In the current era, the Exiters were apparently on their way to have some sort of involvement for TPOT, and the excuse for the rest of Post-Split characters not being included in the exit was because it got full. Which won't make any sense since in TPOT 7, we see everyone leaving the exit itself and Loser and Spongy have already escaped previously, but I digress. The point here that I am trying to make is that the rest of the Post-Split characters, instead of being sent to the BRB, they should instead be sent back to the exit. The Exiters wouldn't really be a good fit for TPOT, especially since most of the characters stuck inside of the exit have friends in BFB rather than in TPOT. This comment essentially sums it up. Shout out to you, jhams009. Plus, if the eliminated characters in Post Split still continued to be sent to the exit, Post Split could continue to have rejoins in the show, and could bring back previous contestants, instead of what they did in the modern era, and have no rejoins. Doing this would also just clearly be easier on the J&J crew since it seems they do not know how they are going to handle the exiters, as shown in a recent Q&A service at the BFDI meetup.
Yeah, Drew, want to find another person? Oh.
Will the exiters ever be mentioned again?
Yes. Yeah, right now we're not sure if it's going to be in a later TPOT episode or maybe like a spin-off season of itself, but it's definitely going to be.
So that's my very brief yet long hot take on the exiters. Just keep them in BFB, and continue to use it as the elimination area to bring back rejoins. Now, for the final change I would make onto BFB, it all comes down to the two hosts of the season and how they had acted. 4 and X. I'm no stranger to hating these two characters, as I am sure many others do as well. But no two characters in a show had ever motivated me to simply not want to watch a show ever again besides these two.
4, there is still something very wrong with this situation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that can be next month's challenge!
In the beginning of the split, the pair, especially 4, had drastically increased the amount of screen time they had, to the point where he had practically robbed it from characters. Furthermore, it had slowly gotten tiring seeing him constantly kill the cast off over and over again for funny gags, when it just had not been funny and got annoying fast. It got to a point where characters who had not even been official hosts such as Purple Face had served as better hosts than 4, which really says a lot on how hard he had gotten derailed. It genuinely was so refreshing to see him be completely removed from the show for 2 episodes and see him be replaced by the announcer near the end of the show, which just goes to show how bad not just 4, but both the pair had been. If all of these problems about 4 had been fixed, we may have had possibly one of the best hosts in the entirety of BFDI. But instead, we are left with something that doesn't even feel worthy to even call a host. How unfortunate. Post Split was great. It may have not been perfect, but at least it was enjoyable. It brought us back to a consistent era of BFDI where we were constantly being brought brand new BFDI episodes nearly every month and were not just left in silence for what feels like years. It may not have been everyone's perfect cup of tea, but it was amazing while it was here. This reality of Post Split may never exist, but it's nice to think about the possibilities of what could have happened with the season. But hey, what do you think of my thoughts of Post Split and how I would change it? Is there anything you agree with? Is there anything you outright hate? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you all for watching.